Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 54 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we are going to reveal our first set of rookie rankings. So I have my top 24 rookies here in the 2025 NFL draft class. And so we will be walking you through all 24 of those players and break down where I see them going in the draft, how I'm currently evaluating them, and just how my board overall stacks up as we get into the last month or so before the NFL draft actually takes place. So as always, before we jump into that, just want to remind everyone, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We are on everything out there, so whether you are a Spotify person, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, we are on everything. So go make sure you're following the show so you don't miss any future episodes. And then you can find us on social media as well. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. Go subscribe on YouTube at the same handle. And then we also have a Facebook page as well that you can follow along with. We just post new episodes on that Facebook page. So reach out, any questions on social media. We're happy to interact. And we hope you can give us a subscription over there on YouTube as well to help that channel grow. And with all that being said, we're going to jump on into today's episode. And to kick things off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. Our podcast has officially reached over 1,000 listeners. So that is a really awesome achievement. And I'm very thankful for all of you who have continued to tune into these shows and, spend some time every week with us talking about Dynasty Fantasy Football. So thank you again for that. And let's hope we can have an even bigger year two. So let's get into these rankings. So top 24, I have them broken down in terms, this is just overall rankings. This is not by position. This is my actual top 24 overall rankings. And we'll have everything broken down by tiers. Right now I have kind of a loose tier-based system right now, but we're going to go more into tiers later. Over the next month or so leading up to the draft, we are going to do weekly episodes where I go more in depth on each position, where we get to more players and really talk through, from top to bottom, favorites, sleepers, that sort of thing. And then, of course, post-draft, I will have a big final rookie rankings episode that will drop immediately after the NFL draft is over. That way you have them ready to go, finalized for your rookie drafts, especially if you're in leagues where your draft starts pretty quickly after the NFL draft finishes up. So I try to have that done on that same weekend of the draft. So lots to come over the next month or so. And let's move into the rankings. So at 101 in my set of rankings is the consensus Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State, projected first-round draft capital. Remains to be seen whether or not he'll be in the top 10. I know there's been some buzz lately about the Raiders being interested in him, the Bears at 10, and there's a number of teams that could use a running back, and Jeanty is the consensus number one pretty much across the board. Anywhere you look that's pumping out fantasy football content, it's pretty clear that Jeanty is the number one guy. He comes in at 5'8", 211 pounds. As of today, I'm recording this on Sunday, March 16th. Ashton Jeanty is 21.3 years old, and his stat line was incredible, of course. Heisman finalist, had over 2,600 rushing yards and 29 touchdowns, and also caught 23 passes this season as well for 138 yards and another touchdown. So just an absolute workhorse, 3-down back. I think he's going to be everything that you would hope for in your 101 in a rookie draft. I don't see any world where anyone else would take over that top spot. It doesn't matter if Cam Ward goes 101. It doesn't matter if Marion Hampton goes in the first round, if Tet McMillan goes top 10. As long as Ashton Jeanty goes in the first round of the NFL draft, he's going to be the 101 in all formats of a Dynasty rookie draft. Now, if you play in like an IDP league with defensive players, maybe, something with Travis Hunter comes into play, but I don't play in that format, so we're not going to get into that here. But Ashton Jeanty, clear-cut, number one. Not a whole lot to say other than that. If you have the 101, I would most likely be holding on to that pick. I just don't know that there's a situation that I would be inclined to trade down. I think this is something where you just take the clear best guy and go with it, because after Ashton Genty, even though there are many, many other good players in this draft, there are question marks about every single other player. I just don't feel as confident or as comfortable in the rest of this draft board compared to how I felt last year, where last year's draft, you could get 8-9 players deep, and I felt awesome about it. Slam dunk type of players. The top 4, top 5 last year were just easy picks of these guys are all going to be studs, and I just don't know that I feel the exact same way this year. Lots of good players. I'm happy to have first round picks in this draft, particularly if your team is short on running backs, but I just don't know that there is a lot of star power and depth here within players that could end up as first, second, third round startup picks in the next couple of seasons like there was last year. So just kind of a word of caution that outside of Ashton Genty, it's not necessarily as strong of an early first round class as you maybe would expect. Or at least what we were treated to last year, which was, looks like an all-time great rookie class. Moving on to my number 2 player, it's Amarian Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. He is currently also being projected as a first-round pick. He has snuck into the back half of the first round, and I think that's going to make a huge difference on where he ultimately finishes in my rankings. If he does go in the first round, I think he will absolutely be locked in as the number 2. He is 22 years old, 6 foot, 221 pounds, had over 1,600 yards rushing with 15 touchdowns, and he also caught a lot of passes, 38 balls, 373 yards through the air, and a couple more touchdowns. So really good player, was involved in North Carolina's offense both as a sophomore and a junior and had really big seasons. So this isn't someone that just is a one-year wonder. And same with Ashton Genty, by the way. We kind of skipped over, discussing him analytically and whatnot, but lots of production there. I'm not concerned at all about his production. But Amarian Hampton was a very, very important part of that North Carolina offense. And I think if he does go in the first round, these first-round running backs, we talked about this on a few shows, maybe a month ago or so, about the vast majority of running backs that are drafted in the first round are hits for fantasy football. There's obviously a few here and there that didn't pan out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire did not work out. Rashad Penny did not work out. And, there's a couple here and there that stand out. But generally speaking, these guys that are going in the first round and being discussed as first-round guys leading up to the draft and aren't, surprise picks, they've been really great. So I feel good about Amarian Hampton. I think he can do everything. Full 3-down back, catch passes. He can play on third down, and he can carry the workload. He's had a couple big workloads at North Carolina already on the ground in terms of carries. And so I do not have concerns. His NFL Combine was very strong, really high speed score number based on his weight, running a 4.4 at over 220 pounds. That is really, really nice to see. And so for all those reasons, he slots in as my number 2 overall player. At number 3, we're going to go over to wide receiver and go with Tet McMillan out of Arizona. He's also a first-round pick, and he is currently 21.9 years old. He's 6'4", 219 pounds. He had 84 receptions for 1,319 yards, along with 8 touchdowns. And this is a receiver that, I'm not necessarily a big comp guy in terms of always having comparisons for various players, so I don't love to throw them out all the time. But with wide receivers, I think it's a little bit easier than running back to do that. And he's someone, big body receiver, good at contested catches, a good guy in terms of, going up, being able to snatch the ball out of the air with his hands, and is not someone that struggles with drops. He's not necessarily the smoothest route runner or separator, but he is, a very good route runner in the same token. And I think he has some flashes of a T. Higgins to his game. And that's kind of the mold that I view him as. He's more of one of those big physical types of receivers. He's not going to be, I don't view him as like a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, separator that's just going to rack up the yards and have these, those types of games. I think he's more of an outside receiver that can go up, get the ball. He should score a decent number of touchdowns in the NFL. And I think that's kind of the style of player that he is. And there's certainly a role for that in the NFL. A great size, like you mentioned. And he's currently my clear wide receiver 1. Now, Travis Hunter is kind of the, wild card in all of this because, of course, whether he plays wide receiver, does he play corner, he's going to be drafted in the top 5. So he's going to have incredible draft capital, which probably will be better than Tet McMillan's, who could go anywhere from, 4th or 5th to, late teens, early 20s. But Travis Hunter, we don't know if he's going to actually play full-time wide receiver in the NFL. And so that's why he's a little bit further down this list. Now, if he were to play full-time wide receiver in the league, he would most likely jump up into this top 4, top 5. I think he'd probably slot in right next to McMillan. I don't know who necessarily would be 3rd and who would be 4th. I'd have to dig into things a little bit more. And of course, landing spots will matter. But that's the reason that I can't put Travis Hunter as my wide receiver 1. I just can't take that gamble at this stage in the process that someone who might not be a full-time wide receiver, we can't be burning an early first-round pick on him in rookie drafts. That's an easy way to prolong your rebuild if you're picking this high. But for now, Tet McMillan at number 3, I'd feel very good about landing him at the 3 spot in drafts. At number 4, I'm going to go to quarterback. Again, we're talking in terms of a superflex league. I'm going to go with Cam Ward, and he's being projected as the first overall pick in the draft to the Tennessee Titans. I don't see any world where he falls past the Giants at number 3, and it's, of course, possible that the Giants or any other teams that are quarterback needy, the Browns who pick at number 2, could trade up to number 1 to select him if the Titans are not sold. However, it seems like at this point, Tennessee is likely to select Cam Ward, and so I have him here at number 4 in my rankings. 22.8 years old, 6'1.5", 219 pounds, 67.2 completion percentage last year, 4,300 yards, 39 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and he's not a statue. This is not a guy that is going to be unable to provide you with any sort of rushing floor. I think he can absolutely pick up some yards on the ground. Now, I don't think he's going to be a Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson type of runner where he's just running around. But think in the way that a Justin Herbert, a Patrick Mahomes, those types of players that are agile and mobile enough to, scramble when needed, but not someone that's necessarily looking to just take off and run all the time. Even a little bit in terms of, flashes of, Caleb Williams, I think, to an extent. Similar in that they both like to extend plays, looking down the field. And Cam Ward fits into that mold as kind of an improviser, if you will, in terms of his play style. And he's a good passer. He had a really strong year at Miami. He had a couple really nice years at Washington State. And he did run the ball a little bit more over there. So I do think that you can get a solid baseline of a couple hundred rushing yards with his production in the NFL, which I think gives him a nice floor to start things off. And I think it's it's one of the big reasons that I have such a big gap here between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, who we'll get to later. But I just think that Ward gives you a little bit more on the ground, and he's a stronger passer than Sanders. And so that's why Cam Ward, especially given the draft capital, comes in at number 4, because quarterbacks in Superflex are sort of the ultimate currency. You always need QBs. You can never have enough. And sometimes guys that you think are solidified as starters or veterans and whatnot, they lose their jobs quickly, and things go away fast when they lose it. Think like Kirk Cousins. Or even Deshaun Watson, who we've had a few years of, hey, maybe he doesn't have it anymore, and then all of a sudden tears his Achilles, and boom, he's done. So always nice to have extra quarterbacks, and that's where I think at this point in time, Cam Ward is my number 4. That could definitely change if Tet McMillan doesn't have a great landing spot, or some of these other players, Trevion Henderson, Luther Burden, end up with better landing spots, or a third running back goes in the first round. I think a first-round running back would probably jump Cam Ward in these rankings and would actually be in a potentially a good position to move up to number 3. So that's where these rankings will change after the draft. These are just my rankings right now. Things will look very different post-draft, especially in a year where running back is the strongest position by far, because the running backs, where they get drafted, does have a big impact on their value. And so that's going to shake things up in terms of how these rankings go at the end of April. But for now, Cam Ward, number 4, and let's move on over to number 5, where I have Trevion Henderson. So Ohio State running back, the first of 2 Ohio State running backs on this list. And he's being projected to be an early second-round pick at the moment. I think he is someone that could go in the first round. Would be very exciting for fantasy if he goes in the first round. Definitely someone that can, give you those explosive big plays. He's a good pass catcher. He also is a strong runner as well. He broke out as a freshman at Ohio State and then had a couple years where he was banged up, dealing with injuries, and then split the backfield in his final season as a senior with Quinshon Judkins, who transferred over from Ole Miss. So Trevion Henderson is 22.3 years old, checks in at 5'10", 202 pounds, had over 1,000 yards on the ground with 10 touchdowns, and then 27 catches for 284 yards and a touchdown this past season where Ohio State won the national title. And just a very good, strong player. Fast, elusive, he's shifty, and I've seen some comparisons online to like a Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that's a reach. I don't think he is as fast or as good of a receiver as Jahmyr Gibbs, but at least in terms of style and his use on the field, I can see the connection there. So if you want to say a Jahmyr Gibbs light, you could go with that. I don't think he's going to be, a number 1 overall dynasty running back, that Jahmyr Gibbs can be. But in terms of play style, he is somebody that might be in a committee where he does play on the third down and he does, catch more of those passes, but he has more of a power back with him. I think the setup that Ohio State had this past year was actually a pretty good fit for Henderson, who has struggled to stay healthy a bit in the past. So there is some durability concerns here, but in terms of pure talent, I think he absolutely belongs in this middle of the first round at number 5. And a landing spot is going to matter a lot. Is he coming in behind a more established back? Say if he were to go, mid to late second and it's to a team that, has someone that they can rely on. If he goes to a team where he is the clear number 1, I think he's going to really shoot up dynasty ranks. So again, landing spot will matter, but for now, I like him in this 5th spot with potential that he could jump to 4, even to 3, like we just mentioned, if he can go in the first round. At number 6, I'm going to go back to wide receiver with Luther Burden, Missouri wide receiver, projected right now still to go in the first round, although later than kind of initially thought. He was being talked about as a early to mid first round pick, somewhere in like the 10 to 17 range. But now it seems more likely that he's going to go in the 20s at the back end of that first round, which is disappointing and, of course, ultimately hurts his fantasy value. But this is a guy, 21.3 years old, 6 foot, 206 pounds. He had a down year as a junior, so he isn't early declare, but he had 61 catches for 676 yards and 6 touchdowns. A lot of sixes in there for Luther Burden. And it was a rough junior year compared to how good he was as a sophomore, where he had over 1,200 yards, was just absolutely unstoppable, was thought of as the clear number 1 receiver in this draft, or at least, back-to-back with McMillan. But Missouri's offense took a step back. Quarterback play was rough, and, Luther Burden definitely felt those, the rough quarterback play and the team as a whole not being quite as strong. And it's going to hurt his draft capital. But he broke out at a young age. Again, we mentioned the big sophomore season. He's elusive. He's quick, and he's not going to necessarily wow you. He didn't run, like a 4.2, 4.3, anything like that at the combine, but still a speedy guy, good athlete, good after the catch, somebody that can make guys miss. And if he goes to a landing spot where he can end up as the number one receiver, I will be very much in on Luther Burden, especially if he just goes in the first round. I think that's going to show a commitment from a team. And somebody mentioned, I saw this on social media, and so unfortunately I can't give credit, but he's like Zay Flowers if you added 25 pounds. So a little bit stronger, bigger dude, but still that gives you kind of an idea of, good route runner, somebody that can get open, good after the catch, not going to be like one of these huge outside receivers like a Ted McMillan can be, but someone that's good with the ball in their hands. And Luther Burden, it's a receiver style that I like, and he's going to be on a number of my teams as long as he goes in the first round. Next up at number 7, we're going to go with Caleb Johnson, Iowa running back, currently projected as a late second-round pick. Could fall to the third, which is unfortunate, and will likely result in him being pushed down a spot or 2 or 3 in these rankings. But for now, before we get that landing spot in the draft, I do really like Caleb Johnson, 21.6 years old, 6'1", 224 pounds, big, strong running back. He does have some speed. We talked a little bit about the combine and how his 10-yard split time was pretty rough, and his 40 time was solid, but not great. Running a later, I think it was a 4.58, if I recall. And so it would have been nice if he ran a 4.5 flat or got under that number. But still, for somebody that's 224 pounds at 6'1", still has good speed. He actually, even though his start was a little bit slow, I would say that he doesn't necessarily have that quick first step, but he does have a second gear, and he can get to that second gear better than just about everyone else. So he's good acceleration once you get past, those first couple yards, and he's tough to tackle in the open field given his size. And so I do like the general size speed, combo here. I think he can be a 3-down running back. I think that's currently what has him above Judkins for me, is I just see a little bit more of a path to him being a 3-down guy. I think he's a little bit of a better pass catcher than Judkins. And so for that reason, I have him ahead of Judkins. Now, this past season at Iowa, he was basically their entire offense. 240 carries, 1,537 yards, 21 touchdowns. He also had 22 catches for 188 yards and 2 more touchdowns. So not necessarily awesome receiving numbers. He actually had the same number of catches as Judkins. However, 22 catches in Iowa's offense is much different than 22 in Ohio State's offense. And I will say that having 22 for Judkins, splitting time with Henderson, who's viewed as the better pass catcher, was nice. I was pleasantly surprised that he actually had that many receptions. But Caleb Johnson in Iowa, it's one of those things where Iowa's offense, from a passing game perspective, is so bad that seeing someone put up those rushing numbers over 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns, but then still have 22 catches is really impressive. It's like that Colston Loveland effect with Michigan's offense, and we'll get to him soon as well. But he's the entire team's offense, and I like what I've seen from him. If he can, it's going to be a situation where, like some of these other guys, landing spot's going to be really important because he's going to have to fit their offensive scheme. This is something where if you can get him in a zone offense, somebody where, a decent or good offensive line, Caleb Johnson's going to be a smash hit at the NFL level. But if he ends up in an offensive system where the fit just isn't there, or it's a subpar offensive line, not going to be necessarily a great combo for him because he doesn't have that initial quick first step. At number 8 is Quinshon Judkins. So I do have them back to back. I think they're extremely close, and I've gone back and forth with them. So draft capital is going to make a big difference here. Draft capital landing spot between Caleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins. So it certainly is possible that Judkins could move up this list by a few spots and Johnson could fall down a few spots. Judkins currently projected as a second-round pick. He's 21.3 years old, 6 foot, 221 pounds, so not all that different from a size perspective compared to Johnson. Just a little bit smaller, but very, very good running back. 194 carries for over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns this past season at Ohio State. We mentioned the 22 catches and 161 yards through the air there for 2 more touchdowns. He transferred in from Ole Miss, where he was absolutely incredible as a freshman and a sophomore, but his freshman season was his best. Just a really, really good, just burst onto the scene, was instantly talked about as potential, 101 in his class, best running back in his class, etc. Hasn't quite panned out that way, not necessarily because he's been bad. He's still been a very good player. Just the rest of the class has been very good. Namely at the top with guys like Genty and Hampton. But Judkins is someone that is not necessarily a fluid pass catcher. And in today's NFL, I think you really need to have that skill to be a clear, top level running back in Dynasty. So Judkins is someone that I see more of as a low-end RB1 at the next level. I don't know that he'll be a top tier elite guy, but certainly someone that you'll be able to start every week. Should get a lot of carries early on. I think he can handle that workhorse role, and is certainly someone that, at the 8th overall pick in your rookie draft, I would be happy to end up with him given the strength of this class. Running back is where this class is going to, stand out. It's where the talent is here, and so getting a guy like Judkins in the first round, really nice spot to be, especially if you're a playoff team, because 8th overall, we're talking a team that made the playoffs, unless of course it's a traded pick, but those contending teams that are going to be able to get some good players in this draft class are going to be a little bit similar to last year. We're going to have, last year we had Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Bo Nix, guys like that go at the end of the first round to just really further strengthen those contending teams in your league. I think this year could be similar with, whatever one of these running backs falls down the board a bit into this 7, 8, 9, 10 range, along with the other players that we're about to talk about. At number 9, we're going to go back to wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. So yet another Ohio State player on this list, currently projected as a first-round pick, and he is 22.4 years old, could have come out last year, chose to go back to school. Ultimately, it worked out for him, of course, winning a national title and boosting his draft stock a little bit. Although he probably would have been, a late first-round pick last year as well. Maybe was a borderline first, second-round guy. So good decision ultimately. 6'1", 202 pounds, and he had 81 catches for just over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year with Ohio State. And a big-time recruit, of course, as most Ohio State wide receivers are. And the thing with Emeka Egbuka is that he was never the clear number one elite player in that offense. There was always a better receiver on the team. And so whether it was this past year with Jeremiah Smith, whether it was, previous years with guys like Marvin Harrison or going back, JSN, etc., he's always been the number 2. And that's how I see him in the NFL. So potential first-round picker in the NFL draft, late first-round superflex pick, but I don't know that he has the tools to be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver, or whether he would be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. I see him being a very good number 2, a high floor player, somebody that you can safely put in your lineup, and that's, I think the bust potential here is low. So if you're someone that is looking to avoid a huge risk and you don't want to take a shot on, a tight end or, Shedeur Sanders or one of these other, flashier wide receivers that maybe have a higher ceiling, but you just want that safe prospect that's going to get you some fantasy points that you can plug in as a flex play every single week, Emeka Egbuka, I think, is that guy and should be a nice, solid pro for a long time. At number 10, moving over to the tight end position, where I have back-to-back players here at 10 and 11. And so we'll talk about them kind of together. But at number 10, I do have Colston Loveland out of Michigan. He's my number one tight end, which is kind of a bold take here. The consensus is that Tyler Warren is the top tight end. He comes in at number 11 for me. Both guys projected first-round picks. Colston Loveland is 20.9 years old, 6'5", 248 pounds, had 56 catches for 582 yards and 5 touchdowns in his final season as a junior at Michigan. Tyler Warren, a little bit older, 22.8 years old. So, a full 2-year gap between him and Loveland. Also 6'5", 256 pounds. But he had a massive, season last year in terms of the stat sheet. 104 catches, 1,233 yards, 8 touchdowns. He also ran the ball 26 times for 218 yards and 4 scores. So just an elite offensive weapon. Was basically Penn State's entire offense outside of their 2 very good running backs. But both of these players, they were the clear number one receiving threat on their teams. Warren, obviously, with the ridiculous stat line. Colston Loveland, while the numbers don't necessarily stand out, only 56 catches, but he was by far Michigan's entire passing offense. If you watched any Michigan football last season, you would understand how impressive it is to have 56 catches for a little under 600 yards on that Michigan offense. I mean, we're talking an all-time bad quarterback situation. They played 3 different quarterbacks, might have even been 4 at times, and all of them stunk. I mean, terrible from top to bottom. And Colston Loveland was a solid, steady weapon all the way through. He did miss a couple games at the end of the year due to injury, which is another reason why he didn't do a full workout at the combine. Still recovering from those injuries, but nothing that should hinder him long term. And his separation is what puts him a spot above Warren for me. I think if you want someone that's going to be more of a receiver and really thrive as a pass-catching weapon that is going to get open, be a safety valve, think more of like a Travis Kelce, Colston Loveland is going to be that guy. If you want more of a physical tight end that, does a little bit more of everything, but can run the ball, is just a little bit more of a physical guy, then Tyler Warren is your prospect. So, George Kittle versus Travis Kelce type of vibes, both extremely good players. For fantasy, I prefer the tight end that is more of a, receiver first and everything else second. And not that Warren isn't still a receiver first, because he is. But I like the separation aspect that Loveland brings to the table. His yards per out run numbers were very strong. His target share numbers at Michigan, again, elite for the position. So while I see Warren as somebody who can absolutely be an every week starter at the position, Loveland is someone that I see as, he is just a little bit of a higher ceiling in terms of what he can do as a receiver, because he always gets open. And so that appeals to me a lot about him. But I love both guys. Both players would be great picks here at the back of the first. I've seen rankings where, they're back of the first, early second. So if you're anywhere in that, 9 to 15 range in your draft, late first, early second, I think that both of these guys are excellent picks and should be able to slot in as starters on your dynasty teams. Even if it's not right away, we got a little bit lucky with having back-to-back years with, Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta being the number one overall tight end. I don't know that that's going to happen this year. I don't see Loveland or Warren as, number one overall at the position type of guys, but certainly can be every week starters and should be able to get on the field a bit sooner rather than later. And again, I do like the age with Loveland, the fact that he'll be 21 on draft night compared to Tyler Warren, who will be just about to turn 23. That stands out to me. That's 2 extra years of him in the NFL. So Colson Loveland, number 10, Tyler Warren, number 11 in my first set of rankings. All right, so time that we move on now to number 12, Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. He is kind of I'm trying to think of the right word, but he's someone that some people are very high on, others are very low. Just a lot of conflicting opinions about Shedeur Sanders. I don't know exactly where I would fall, but I'm a little bit down on him, I think, mainly because from a dynasty perspective, I don't see the rushing upside. I think he is mobile enough. Again, he's not a statue. He can avoid pressure and, scramble around if needed, but he doesn't necessarily think to run. He's not a running quarterback. He does have some nice accuracy. He completed 74% of his passes, had over 4,100 yards through the air, 37 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. He is 23.1 years old, 6'1", 212 pounds. So has the size, has some good production. He has experience. I'm not necessarily worried about age when it comes to quarterbacks anymore. I think we've seen enough players over the last few years that have, stayed in college for a full 4 years or 5 years and just started a ton of games, and they've been very successful. So I'm not worried about the fact that he's 23 or anything like that. What I worry about is I just don't know that he is a big time, NFL quarterback. I think, could he start and be a somewhat decent, could he be an average NFL starter? Sure. He could. And I think that's why he's still going to go in the first round of the NFL draft, probably still in the top 10. I don't know where he'll go, given that there's a lot of, we don't know exactly where everyone's going to go in terms of Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, and will Kirk Cousins ever be traded? The Falcons decided to pay him the extra $10 million to keep him on the roster. So a lot of question marks on the veteran quarterback market. Could mean that there's a couple more teams still very interested in a Shedeur Sanders, but it seems like the Jets were one of those potential landing spots, and they're going to roll with Justin Fields, although they could still draft Sanders. So landing spot will matter, but I just don't think that he necessarily has the pocket presence of a true, good NFL quarterback. I think you're slotting him in here at the end of the first round, almost because you have to, because he's a quarterback, and a quarterback that goes in the first round is someone that should be taken in the first round of Dynasty rookie drafts, because if he does hit, you have an elite asset. My confidence in him hitting, though, is rather low, and I don't know that I see it at this point in time. Certainly could change when we get into a little bit more closer to the draft, and maybe we get some, once we actually see where he goes, things could change. But as of this moment, he does come in at number 12 for my final pick of the first round. All right, so on to the second round, where we will move through players a little bit faster here than we did through the first 12. But I want to kick things off here at the 201, my 13th overall player, Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas, projected now to be a late first-round pick. For a while was thought of as more of a day 2 guy, but after a very good combine, 4.29 40-yard dash, looks like he might be headed to the first round. And he is 21.6 years old, 5'11", 191 pounds, had 58 catches for 987 yards and 9 touchdowns in his final season at Texas. He is an early declare. He transferred into Texas from Houston, where he spent 2 seasons. And he was a good, solid player all the way around. He got on the field early at Houston, made some nice plays. Obviously, Texas had 2 huge games in the college football playoff. He also had 2 games where he really didn't do anything in the college football playoff, including the, his team's final game against Ohio State. But Matthew Golden is one of the most difficult prospects, I think, to analyze in this class, because when you just watch the film and you see him out there, he seems like a good player, good route runner. He's obviously got the speed and agility and got good hands. So a good player when you watch him on film. But then when you look at the analytics and you look at his stats, you go, well, how come he didn't produce more? I mean, this is a player that with, his skill set, his talent that you can see on tape, he should have better numbers. But the fact that he only had 58 catches, didn't even reach 1,000 yards, and that was despite playing 16 games, he disappeared a lot. He had a lot of games where he just flat out was not impactful on the game, was not someone that you needed to worry about, and just didn't have an impact on games. And that's a crazy thing for a player that's being talked about as a first-round pick. So he's a really difficult evaluation. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Ladd McConkey, especially in the way that I have looked at him, because last year I was pretty slow to come around on McConkey. That was a player that, gradually I moved him up and up and up my board to the point where I was, post-draft was looking to add him in the early part of the second round, but it took me a while to come around to him, and that's kind of how I feel about Matthew Golden. I think that he could move up my ranks several spots if he does go in the first round and ends up in a good landing spot, but I'm kind of going to wait to see that happen before I move him up on my own, just because I really struggle taking players who didn't produce in college. And it's not that he did nothing, right? He had a fine season, but it wasn't exciting to me. It wasn't enough to where I look at those numbers and go, oh yeah, this is a guy that is going to absolutely hit at the NFL level. He has mediocre size, 5'11", 191. So between that and just the inconsistency, I have a hard time going all in, but that doesn't mean that he can't be a really, really good NFL receiver, because we've seen it on tape. If you, if you've watched any, YouTube videos, or you read any analysts that are, big time film guys, you would know that they probably think highly of Matthew Golden, because it seems like on tape, and this is what I've noticed, is that it seems like a very good player. I just also am someone that does take analytics into account. I'm a heavy analytic drafter. I try to take a pretty well-rounded approach where I'm taking both film and numbers into account, but at least based purely on analytics, he wouldn't necessarily be a good pick. So it's the film and what you see from an athletic standpoint that is definitely propping him up. And so we'll see if he can be a better NFL player than he was a college player. And at the 1-2 turn in your drafts, I think that's a great place to take that chance and see what you get. At 14, I have Travis Hunter. So we talked a little bit about him earlier. Obviously, going to be a top 5 pick, almost guaranteed. And but the big question is simply, will he play receiver? Will he play corner? Is he going to be a mix? Is he going to be a full-time corner and have a couple packages on offense? A lot of it could just depend on what team he goes to. So his final ranking is ultimately going to depend on whatever his new team says. If he gets taken by the Browns at number 2 and, their coaching staff and GM come out after draft night and tell everyone, hey, he's a wide receiver, we're going to play him at wide receiver, he shoots up into the top 5. He's just a really good player, obviously, won the Heisman, and he had 96 catches, 1,258 yards, 15 touchdowns. He's 21.8 years old, 6 foot, 188 pounds. So has everything you look for, was a great player at Colorado. And it's just, is he going to play wide receiver? Is he not? And so I'm kind of just hedging at this point, having him slotted in the early second round. Because if it comes out that, he's drafted by, a team in the top 5 and they say, hey, he's a corner, we'll have some plays on offense for him, but he's going to play corner, I don't know that he would even be in the early part of the second for me. I think that's where he would drop to the back of the second round, where you just hope that the team changes their mind. And if I miss, it's fine. Someone else can take that chance. Everyone knows how talented he is and that he's a good player. But when it comes down to the risk reward, if a team tells us that he's going to play corner and have a sub package at receiver, where he plays, 15, 20 snaps, I don't know that that's enough for him to be truly fantasy relevant. And so at that point, I'll take Matthew Golden, I'll take Shedeur Sanders, I'll take Cam Skattebo, guys like that, and I'll let somebody else take the leap with Travis Hunter. At 15, I do have Arizona State running back Cam Skattebo, projected third-round pick, and he's 5'9", 219 pounds. He's 23.1 years old, and he did everything for Arizona State. We have a number of players here in the second round that were basically their team's entire offense, and Skattebo is one of those. 293 carries, 1,711 yards, 21 touchdowns on the ground, but he also had 45 catches for 605 yards and 3 more touchdowns in the passing game. That is an incredible stat line. Now, the big question with Skattebo is how good of an athlete he is. Speed in particular is a question mark. He did not run the 40-yard dash at the combine. Hopefully he does it at his pro day. But if he were to run anything under a 4.6, I think that he is going to be in a position to go on day 2 in the draft, because big, powerful guy, even though he's only 5'9". Again, he does weigh 219 pounds, and he can do everything. He's a great pass catcher. He's one of those players that you just think football guy. Like, he is a grinder. He's a powerful back. He just gives it his all for everything. He's someone that is always keeping his legs moving, always trying to fight for those extra yards. And I think there's a lot of value in that. It's a player that you want in your backfield, and he can be a true 3-down running back because he is good in the passing game as well as on the ground. So as long as he gets third-round capital and he doesn't fall to the 4th or 5th round, he's going to be an early to mid second-round pick for me, and I will scoop him up in a lot of places. My fear is that he falls to round 4 because of the speed concerns, and then he will likely slip down a few spots in these rankings, more of a mid to late second rounder. But for now, since we don't actually know where he's going to go, and we're just going based on projections, he does come in at number 15 for me. At 16, I have Ole Miss wide receiver Trey Harris, and he's being projected as a second-round pick. He's 23 years old, 6'2", 205 pounds, so really good size, and he had an awesome final season until he got hurt with Ole Miss. He had 60 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, and he did all of that in just 8 games, and so he was probably in line for, a 1,400-yard season, 1,500 yards, double-digit touchdowns. Just was really on pace to have an awesome season after he broke out the year before. And, he's had some production throughout college. He's an older player. He played, 5 years in college. So not necessarily something that you love to see. Obviously, you'd prefer that early declare status. But, again, with NIL and everything that's going on now, it's harder to fault players for staying in college an extra year. And with Trey Harris, it made sense. And he had a really nice final season. Just would have been nice if he could have stayed healthy. I think he'd be even higher on draft boards if he had. But I'd be happy to take him in the middle of the second round here. I have him at 16 overall, so I believe that puts him at 204. And paired up with Jackson Dart, just a really great college connection. And has the size. I mentioned the 6'2", 205. That's, what you would want to see from your receivers. I think that, 205 weight is a really good number there. So Trey Harris, somebody that I am excited about in the second round. At 17, I have Bashal Tutin, projected to be a third-round pick, maybe fourth. It's kind of somebody that's right on that border of day 2, day 3. Which will make a huge impact on his draft, his ranking, based on where he goes in the draft. So if he does go in the third round, I think 17 is a great spot for him. He is 22.1 years old, running back, of course, out of Virginia Tech, if I forgot to mention that. But 5'9", 206 pounds, transferred into Virginia Tech after a couple years at, I think it was North Carolina A&T. And he was awesome all 4 years. So his final season at Virginia Tech, 183 carries, 1,159 yards, 15 touchdowns, also caught 23 passes. So a well-rounded back, and he is explosive. He's very fast. We all remember him from the Combine, where he had a 4.32 40-yard dash, best among all running backs, elite 10-yard split. So he does have that quick first step, that initial burst, and someone that, given that he can also catch the ball, I think can be a true 3-down back in this class. And you'll notice that when it comes to my running back rankings, I do definitely favor players that I can see a path to play all 3 downs. You know, there are other players in this class that, good college players, you know, explosive, fast, but I don't see the path to them being a 3-down back. For example, Dylan Sampson comes to mind. He's not in my top 24, spoiler alert. And it's because I don't see the path to being a 3-down player the same way that I do some of these others. So I want those volume plays, those 3-down backs that can, you know, if they get in the right system, can end up as top 10 fantasy running backs. And Tootin is somebody that fits that mold, that if things work out, he can be a really good fantasy asset. So he comes in at number 17. At number 18, back to the quarterbacks, I have Jackson Dart, who is currently projected to be an early second-round pick out of Ole Miss. And he's 21.8 years old, 6'2", 223 pounds. He had a 69.3 completion percentage, 4,279 yards through the air, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He definitely is more of a running quarterback. Not necessarily, again, we're not talking like pure runner, but someone that will definitely pick up rushing yards, probably more so than Cam Ward. So Jackson Dart, draft capital is going to be everything with him. If he goes in the first round, he will be higher on this list. Again, if you're a first-round pick in the NFL and you're in a Superflex league, you know, you're going to be in the top 15 picks. It's just how it's going to be, especially someone that does have a rushing upside. So there's been some chatter about Pittsburgh potentially being interested in Jackson Dart, or another team scooping him up in the back of the first via trade up or something like that. So whether he's a first or second round pick will have a big impact on where he goes in rookie drafts. If he falls later in the second, he will fall further down my board. He's not, if he's a late second round pick, he is not going to be my 18th player. He will almost certainly be someone that I'm looking at the back of the second. So we'll just see how things shake out for him. But that Ole Miss offense is something that is not necessarily the best for translating to the NFL. It's not a pro-style offense. So it'll just be up to an NFL team to tell us all what they really think of him as a player. And if he goes in the first round, that'll be great. All right, so moving on to the back half of round 2. So number 19 is Alec Aomanor, wide receiver from Stanford, currently projected as a second-round pick, 21.8 years old, 6'2", 206 pounds, and a really productive player. 63 catches, 831 yards, 6 touchdowns. He had a strong sophomore season at Stanford that was even better than his junior season, is an early declare, and has the size and the weight that you're looking for at 6'2", 206, and is more of an outside wide receiver. So given the second round draft capital that is currently being projected to him, I think being able to get a player of his caliber in the middle of the second round is certainly a good place to be, especially given this weaker wide receiver class. I think that in general, just in terms of players that I would be excited to have on my team, there's really only about 10 wide receivers that I'm excited about. And I do have all 10 of them here in this top 24. So I have a couple more names here coming up after him, 3 more wide receivers actually. And there's maybe only 12 or 13 guys in general that I'm even like that interested in drafting. So when we get into the 3rd and 4th rounds of your rookie draft, I am primarily going to be just loading up on running backs, given how deep this class is. I think if you're talking about a 4th or 5th round running back compared to a 4th or 5th round receiver, I'm going to take the running back almost every time. So Ayo Manor, number 19, one of the last few receivers that I like in this class, a very athletic player. That's a lot of these receivers that I do like in this range. They did show some, really strong athletic traits at the combine. So Ayo Manor is one of them, and then so is Jaden Higgins, who comes in at number 20 in these rankings from Iowa State. Second round pick is his current projected draft capital. He's 22.3 years old, 6'4", 214 pounds. So another big outside receiver. And he had a really nice season at Iowa State, 87 catches, 1,183 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And he was on an offense that also had Jalen Noel, who we're going to hear about in a minute. But 2 NFL receivers, strong offense, and he fits the mold as one of those outside big body receivers. So a little bit similar to, kind of the style of Tet McMillan. I don't think he's as good of a player, of course, but that type of receiver, an outside guy, and I think maybe like a Cortland Sutton. And so Jaden Higgins, if he gets second round draft capital, should be in a really nice position for fantasy to make an impact. At number 21, we're going back to the running backs with Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas. And he's being projected as a 4th round pick. Could sneak into the 3rd, which would be nice. But currently, 4th round pick. And he's 21.6 years old, 5'11", 213 pounds. Was just a 4-year producer at Kansas. Got on the field early, made an impact. Had a great final season as well. 219 carries, 1,266 yards, and 16 touchdowns. Also had 24 catches for 254 yards and another touchdown. So Devin Neal is a player that, again, 3-down running back. He can do everything. I wish he were a little bit better of an athlete. He was a little bit slow at the combine, not to the point where he necessarily moved very far down my board, especially since he does have solid size, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from him, but still, all-around good player, can do everything, was the leader of that Kansas offense, and the fact that he just had such consistent production there, I think that translates and should help him from a draft capital standpoint. Does have, a lot of carries under his belt, so definitely has a little bit of wear and tear, but at this point in the back of the second round, I really like to take a shot on players that have this level of production. And if he can get day 2 capital and go in the 3rd round, that would be even better. And he'd probably jump up a few spots on this list. At number 22, I have Jalen Noel, another Iowa State wide receiver, this one being projected in the 3rd round. And Noel is more of a slot receiver. So had an incredible NFL combine. He's just an ultimate, just top tier elite athlete. And he's 22.5 years old, 5'10", 194 pounds. And he had 80 catches for 1,194 yards and 8 touchdowns. So very, very similar receiving line to his teammate, Jaden Higgins. And it just comes down to, do you want the outside guy or do you want the inside guy? Higgins, the X receiver, Noel, the slot receiver. And I think both can play at the next level. I think both will find a spot. I don't know that either one will necessarily be a wide receiver 1, but Jalen Noel is somebody that I think can make an impact in the slot, can be a flex player in your lineup. And we've seen slot receivers in the past, make an impact on fantasy, and especially in PPR leagues, which most Superflex dynasty leagues are. They do play with PPR scoring. And so Jalen Noel is somebody that I could see fitting in as a consistent slot player, and I'm happy to take that shot at the back of the 2nd round. All right, so let's move on into our final 2 players here. We've been going for about an hour here in the podcast, and number 23 is going to be DJ Giddens, running back out of Kansas State, currently projected as a 4th round pick. Again, fingers crossed on him that we can get him into the 3rd round. Same with Devin Neal. From frankly, the more running backs that go on day 2, the stronger this draft class becomes. So Giddens is somebody that also had a very good NFL combine, showed us that he's an elite athlete, and he's 21.5 years old, 6 foot, 212 pounds. He had 205 carries for 1,343 yards and 7 touchdowns this past season. He also had 21 catches for 258 yards and a touchdown. So DJ Giddens is someone that can definitely get it done on the ground. Also can make catches out of the backfield. I don't know that he's a great receiver, so he'd probably need to improve on that area, but definitely has size and the speed and the athletic ability to make an impact if he's given a starting job. So it's probably a situation where he steps into a committee as a rookie, and if he's given the opportunity to be a starter, the sky is the limit. It's just a matter of will he get that chance. But even if he does not end up as a full-time 3-down starter, while I do think he has that potential, he should be a very solid committee back at the next level, and just hoping that he can get some better draft capital, because I do like him as a sleeper in this class, given how good of an athlete he is. Last but not least, in this top 24, I have Jalen Royals, a wide receiver out of Utah State. Projected 3rd-round pick. He is 22 years old, 6 foot, 205 pounds, so he's got some good size. And he had 55 catches for 834 yards and 6 touchdowns, all in just 7 games this past season before he missed time due to an injury. And he had a 1,000-yard season the year before at Utah State. And this is kind of your classic small school wide receiver that is sneaking his way up into the rankings. I've seen some Rashee Rice comps because of that. I don't know if that entirely fits, but someone that is a much better player than last year's small school guy in Malachi Corley, who was more of a scat back type of receiver where he's lots of screens and stuff like that. Jalen Royals has the size to be an outside receiver. He can probably, he has some flexibility. He can do everything. But he's had a nice offseason. I believe we had some good reports from the Senior Bowl, and you're talking at the 2-3 turn, a 3rd-round pick in a receiver class that, needs a couple guys to step up. Jalen Royals could be that guy. I think that the ceiling is higher with him than some of these other players that might go in this range. Think like another player that's probably going in the same type of range is an Isaiah Bond, who I'm really not a big fan of. I don't, as you can see, I don't have him in my top 24. And so Jalen Royals, I like the potential. He has the size, and the production was there. So again, it's one of those where if he had played the entire season, he would have easily surpassed 1,000 yards. Could have, crossed the 1,300-yard mark, and he maybe would have been a little bit higher up on the board. But I like the potential here. And as a day 2 pick, I think he is deserving of a top 24 spot. So there you have it. That is my top 24. My next couple picks to kick off the 3rd round, I think in some order, would likely be Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green, Ollie Gordon, running back out of Oklahoma State, and Sampson, running back out of Tennessee, who again is more of a smaller but speed running back. So very different comparison compared to an Ollie Gordon, who is a much bigger running back. So we'll get into some of those guys along with everyone else that we did not mention today when we get through our position rankings, where we'll just go through top 24 at each position, depending on the number of players that are draft worthy. And we'll get into those players over the next about month and a half or so. But here's our top 24. So I'll do the quick rundown here. Number 1, Ashton Genty, Amarian Hampton, Tet McMillan, Cam Ward, Travion Henderson, Luther Burden, Caleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins, Emeka Egbuka, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, and Shedeur Sanders. That is my top 12. And then my second round, I have Matthew Golden, Travis Hunter, Cam Scattaboo, Trey Harris, Bashal Tutin, Jackson Dart, Alec Aomanar, Jaden Higgins, Devin Neal, Jalen Noel, DJ Giddens, and Jalen Royals. So there's my top 24 rankings. This is our first full set of rankings this spring. And we'll get into a whole lot more rookie content in the weeks ahead. So thank you all very much for tuning in. I appreciate your time. I hope you come back and check out this podcast next week and the weeks that follow. And we will talk to you all then in the next episode.